Good evening. So you know the meaning now, why we say good evening. The seventh Dalai Lama, in one of his beautiful poems, he writes, whether you look to those people who are in the higher position or to those who are in the lower position, or those who are lay people, laymen and women, or to the monks and nuns, the only difference that I can see is that their costumes are different, their expressions are different, their haughtiness, some are very arrogant, some are less arrogant, some differences. But underneath, all are same, experiencing one or the other kind of sufferings and problems. It's a very important observation. And I have seen this many times myself, and I'm sure you have seen this many times yourself. I wanted to just give you one example. It's a very interesting example. For example, when I check in a nice hotel, 5-star hotel or something like that, or when I take a flight, then when we meet at the lobby or waiting in the lounge, then people who come to stay in that hotel or who are going to take that flight, everybody pretends as a gentleman, gentlewoman. At the most they'll say, hi. I'm somebody just as you are somebody, I'm somebody, kind of attitude. Not many smile, See, I'm somebody staying in 5-star hotel, see. I'm somebody taking a flight, see. So I belong to the higher category kind of attitude. Okay, all right. Then we take the flight. The flight is smooth, weather is nice. Still, the same gentlemen and women, everybody just busy with themselves, not so interested in talking to others. Then the pilot announces, ladies and gentlemen, very soon we are entering the turbulent zone. Tie your belt. Then people show more interest towards each other. And when they finally enter the turbulence, everybody immediately looks much nicer, smiling. Have you seen things like that? I'm not exaggerating. I have many other stories, but this is just enough for one example. So what I'm saying is, pretension will not work. When you face the reality, pretension will not work. When an earthquake comes, it is for everybody. It will not come for, wicked people or poor people. It will come, but it will not see whether you are rich or it will level everybody. Likewise, aging, sickness, death. The great leveler, as we call it. So therefore, if you remove that superficial facade and see the reality, same. And once you understand that, then you understand, okay, this person is pretending to be something great, but I know you. So you develop, deep down you develop some kind of concern and sense of responsibility. So that's why it's important to understand the reality, the way things are, going beyond the superficial aspect and expression. Now the way to solve that underlying suffering and problem that we all experience is to develop that positive mental perspective based on which you are able to show that kindness, appreciation of what you have received from others, understanding of interdependent reality, understanding that we will kind of swim and sink together. So with this understanding, you take more universal sense of responsibility. So that's what this being taught in these texts. Okay. So the next line that we are going to read is the actual body of the text. And before explaining that, we need to discuss a little bit about the preliminary practices. Initially train, so out of the 7 points, the first point is preliminary supporting dharma practices. Supporting dharma practices. That supporting dharma practices means that you must have these preliminary practices. So the root text reads, initially train in the preliminaries. Preliminaries. Preliminary here primarily means reflecting about the preciousness of human life. Preciousness of human life primarily in terms of your great mental capacity to discern the reality, the capacity to distinguish between good and bad, which no other sentient beings have. And it's because of this great human intelligence, human mental power, that we call our life precious human life. But the fact is that this mental power itself is neither good nor bad. It's a given potential. So if you want to make your life precious human life, then you need to use this given mental power in the right direction, practicing the positive values, cultivating bodhicitta and so forth. Then your life really becomes precious human life. This is important because many people ask the question, Geshe-la, in your Buddhist text they say like it's very difficult to get the precious human life. But see, look at the population. The human population is expanding, exploding. So how can you say this is precious human life? In the beginning I had no answer. Oh, this looks like true. There is also a story of a Lama giving a talk in Tibet long time back, talking about the reality of human life, how difficult it is to get. And then somebody among the public, he said, oh, Lama is talking about the preciousness of human life because he did not visit China. Because there the population is so big, you see. So people get that kind of idea. But then this is to be understood in the sense that human population is, yes, growing, things like that. But if you compare it to other life forms, like ants, they're just countless. You're not matched to them. Their population is much more than us. So from that point of view, you can say it is difficult to find, number one. Number two, the real precious human life, only few people have. The rest, yes, they are human beings, but probably not precious human life because they are not, using it properly. So people who use their human life and mental power to the right direction, engage in positive practices, that population is very small. And then also the increasing human population does not explain that it's easy to get human life, but we have more increasing population because unlike before, the medical facilities and other things are better. There are better means of, health. So therefore the population grows a little bit, okay? So anyway, whatever be the case, you can appreciate the fact that your life as a human life is comparing to the many other life forms is really, really unique and precious. I mean, look at our body size. It's so small, not so big, comparing to elephant or whales and so many. We are nothing. Then look at the agility of other animals like the monkeys and so forth. We are nothing. The number one gold medalist in the world cannot be a match to the fish or to the monkeys, Naturally, they are so good in many things. But still, because we have this great human intelligence, we are able to control the rest of the animals. because of this human intelligence. So therefore it is important to use this human intelligence in the right direction. If you use it in the right direction, it can be a source of benefit for many, many people, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, or Buddha, or Mother Teresa, or Mahatma Gandhi, or whoever. There are so many people, good people. Just one individual can bring so much benefit to so many people. But if you misuse this human intelligence, then we have again a long list of people who again just one person brought so much suffering and problem to the rest of the mankind. So therefore it is really important that the elder people take the responsibility of educating the younger generation, how they can properly use that wonderful human potential and power to the best possible way. It's very, very important. So therefore, one point is to think about the preciousness of human life. Now this human life is very precious, very difficult to find. But having found this precious human life, if there is a guarantee that we are going to live a long, long life, healthy life, then okay. We can relax a little bit, have fun, and then gradually we can practice. If there is a certainty that we are going to live, say, at least 100 years or something like that. But not only death is definite, but the time of death is indefinite. It can come any time. So we cannot take it for granted and wait and think that I'll do the practice later on. We cannot wait. We are good in making appointments. Okay, 3 o'clock I'm meeting this person, 5 o'clock I'm meeting this person. But the Lord of Death will not come to you seeking your appointment. When do you want to die? It will come anytime. Anytime. So it's important to repeatedly think about this. Not to frighten oneself unnecessarily, but to be realistic. Because once you remember that, like for example, if you are to travel tonight even to Delhi, you will not be sitting here listening to the talk. You may be already in the bus station or something like that, because you know that I have to prepare, I have to catch the bus, I have to be there in time. When you have that awareness, then you prepare so that your journey is smooth. So likewise, if we have that awareness of the death coming any time, then our life, life will be much, much more reformed. We will be more ethical. We will be more nice. Much more nice. It's very, very important. Normally we don't remember this, so therefore we keep on postponing, do the useless things first and most important things one day. That's why many people, first of all, they don't come to do Dharma practice. They don't come to teachings, thinking that, this is an old traditional way of doing things, let us have fun, do the modern way, the modern life. That's why many people say, I wish to do Dharma practice, but I have no time. Even here I met many young people, Geshe-la, I really want to come, but I have no time. It takes such a long time to go there, and things like that. So many excuses. So I just tease them by saying, just be honest and say, I'm not interested. Rather than beating about the bush, So that clearly shows we have not seen the purpose of such practice. Therefore we think that if I get time, with nothing else to do, then I'll do this. And people become monks and nuns also in many cases like that. When they fail miserably in the worldly activities, then they become monk and nun. And His Holiness says this is bad omen. Because if you are not successful in worldly activities, how can you be successful in this Dharma activities? Worldly activities means activities that you can learn from others by seeing, by hearing, by talking. But when we talk about experiences for the future life, we are talking about going into a totally unknown world. So unless you have enough preparation for yourself, it will be very, very difficult. So therefore the Buddha The first teaching that the Buddha gave us on impermanence, which includes death. The last teaching that he gave us on impermanence. With the hope that if people really spend some time thinking about impermanence and death and so forth, it will make a move. It will move them. It will shake them, just like earthquake. Earthquake comes, at least for some time, oh, what should I do kind of thinking comes naturally. Because it gives you the warning that, okay, you can be gone. Be careful, you can be gone right there. If such thing happens, then what is best for us? You see. So therefore it's really important to think about this uncertainty of life. In other words, sometimes when I give a public talk, I choose the topic, finding happiness in an uncertain world, in an uncertain time. Everything is uncertain. So one that is really certain is if you do good, you will have good. If you do bad, you will have bad. That is certain. But we are fond of doing those things which is where there is no certainty. It's fathoming the darkness. Maybe if I do this, I'll get this. Maybe if I do this, I'll get this. There's no guarantee, but we are fond of doing those things, groping in the darkness. So it's important to think about the preciousness of human life. I don't want to go into the detail because it is there in the text to read. But just using your common sense, compare your life to a dog, to a cow, to an insect, a mosquito, and things like that. Compare in what sense you are better. Just eating and sleeping and going to the toilet. Animals also do the same thing. So we are definitely not better in that, but in that sense we are much more complicated. The animals, they don't need a toilet. We need a toilet, we need air-conditioned room. I mean, so complicated, human life. When we want to go to some other country, you need this thing called visa. The birds, they fly everywhere they want to fly. And we have always something to carry with us, in many cases excess baggage, The birds don't have any of these things. And then somebody dies, then we have to dispose of the body and things. So while leading such a complicated life, it has to be useful. It has to be useful. Therefore, Shantideva in his Bodhicharyavatara very powerfully says that since you have been giving wages to this body, just like the workers, when you hire some people to work, then you give wages to them. And you give wages to them only if they are working. If they are not working, then you'll say, you're not working, I'm not going to give you anything. Now look at your body, your mind. You've been feeding them, giving wages, clothing, cleaning, how many times you have to clean yourself, how many times you have to feed. Oh my God. And having looked after so much, what this mind is doing to you, what this body is doing to you. So therefore, get the benefit of serving the body and the mind. A very powerful statement. Second, as I said, even if you have, having obtained this precious human life, if there's a guarantee that you are going to live for a long, long life, okay, then it's okay. But there's no certainty there. You can be gone any time. So therefore, seize the opportunity right now. Just like an unemployed person just like a person who has been unemployed for a long, long time and had now penniless and looking for a job. Then suddenly if there's an advertisement and if you see that there's a possibility for you to get a job, you will immediately rush and apply, So like that. Very difficult to get such a human life. Now we got it. Now don't miss the opportunity. Do something which will make you excel than the life of the birds, animals, and so forth. And then, after death, if death means just completely disappearing into nothingness, then it's okay, have fun now. Many people say that. This is the only life, have fun. Who knows what is there after life, Who has seen that there is an afterlife? This is the only life, have fun. Whatever that means. Have fun. I have a lot of doubt about this thing called having fun. Sometimes I tease my younger Tibetans by saying, Nawa Kiboda, Pala Nurnius. Pala Toyeda, Nawa Kiboshin, Noringa Yorda Silabio Samsa. So again, we need to think a little bit. According to the Buddhist teaching, it says when you die, you are not going to disappear into nothingness. Your action, positive and negative, will follow you. You are not going to disappear into nothingness. You are going to go to the next life, which means the going of your mind. There is death to the body, but mind continues. When the mind continues, it carries with it, it's all the habits, positive and negative habits. And if you have more negative habits, then naturally you have to suffer the consequences of those negative habits. So therefore it is important that you make your mind habituated with the positive practices, so that you are able to travel from peace to peace, happiness to happiness. And the fourth preliminary practice is to think about the limitations of the samsara, the force of the samsara, khorva, cycle of existence. When we say khorva, samsara, or cycle of existence, we are not talking about this ordinary world. Many people think, oh, we are living in the samsara, which means this world. In Buddhism, we are not talking about this world as a samsara. We are primarily talking about samsara to the state of your psychophysical aggregate. Your psychophysical aggregate is samsara. It is this psychophysical aggregate which is projected by the negative emotions. It is under the influence of negative emotions. Therefore, helplessly, you are born, you die, you are born, you die, and until you cut the end of this continuity or the chain of afflictive emotions, you are bound to come back again, recycling. Okay? So therefore, unless you are able to put an end to the action and the motivators of, the negative emotions, the action, and the motivators of this action, the negative emotions, unless you are able to put an end to the root cause of the samsara, you are compelled to come again and again. Now the question is, do you want to come back again and again? Okay, if you are able to come back, at least like us human beings, it's not perfect, but it's okay, little bit okay. But there's no guarantee that you will come back in the same, more or less the same human life. You may come back as a snake. You may come back as a crow. You may come back even as a mosquito or whatever, So if such thing happens, then forget about dharma practice. What will you do then? So therefore, thinking in these lines, having got this very wonderful human life, this is the time. The Buddhist teachers, they say that today you are standing at a crossroad. It is up to you to choose to go up or down. It is up to you to choose to go up or down. There is a joke which says that the so-called heaven may not be so pleasant and good, because even the famous lamas, when they die, they don't go rush into that state of heaven gladly, but they take few steps and then look back to the samsara, then few steps and look back to the samsara. So it may not be so pleasant. And then they said the so-called hell may not be so bad because everybody is rushing there. Everybody is rushing there. So that is the true picture. It is a joke, but it's a true picture. Because when it comes to doing the bad things, it's so easy. When it comes to getting angry, it's so easy. You don't need special meditation to get angry. You don't need special sessions to develop attachment. It comes spontaneously, naturally. And you are so good in that. Clearly showing that you are very strongly habituated in that. When it comes to practicing patience, compassion is so difficult. Because we don't try to practice it. You only talk about it. Don't try to practice it. It's very difficult. So therefore, it's important to see the limitations and faults, disadvantages of samsara. Aryadeva, in his text, famous text called 400 Verses, he says, that means somebody who is not fed up with this samsara will not develop genuine respect to liberation, to nirvana. That means if somebody is really in his new house or something and enjoying, then he will not think about moving to some other place. You will think about moving to some other place if you have had some disagreement with your family members, or you are not happy with that place and so forth. Then you day and night you think about moving to some other. Oh, I want to go to America, I want to go to Australia, whatever, When you had a big problem, then you don't feel like staying there. Then you develop more respect or appreciation to go to other place. So similarly, if we see the faults, the shortcomings of the samsara, and if you are fed up with that, the samsara, then day and night you will long for liberation. Where is it? It's not there. Because as I said yesterday, we still think, so far samsara is quite good, okay. We do say samsara is bad. Deep down we are saying, so far samsara is okay. I went for shopping, so it was pleasant. I went for a picnic, it was good. Things like that. So there is no genuine feeling of fed up or discussion with the samsara. So it's important to really reflect about the shortcomings of samsara and think, what are you going to achieve with this ordinary way of life? And one has to spend some time to think about these things. Not just reading the text. Otherwise the text, say more or less, most of the texts are quite same. Although there are so many volumes you see in the Tibetan library and elsewhere, but if you know some of the meanings, most of them are quite similar. You don't have something new to tell you all the time. But this same perennial messages that is found in the teaching has to be practiced based on one's own capacity and time, as much as possible. So therefore I tell people that you should consider this spiritual practice as the national highway. National highway means there's the main road on which you will travel. Then other small errands that you need to run, small things that you do. These are like side tracks, You go a little bit here, but come back on the national highway. But normally we don't do like that. The national highway is the worldly pursuit, the material pursuit. Then the spiritual practice, when you have time. So that's why we are not able to achieve what we want. We are not making big progress. And only when there is an earthquake, only when you see somebody, your near dear ones dying, then for a few minutes you feel sad and start thinking a little bit. After that again, if somebody's husband dies or wife dies, then the husband or wife cry for a few days. Then after 3-4 months you get a new husband, a new wife. Forget everything. And especially in today's world, materialistic world, people are really thinking that long-lasting peace and happiness will come from outside. If I have this wife, I will be happy. If I have this car, I will be happy. If I'm able to move to this house, I will be happy. Then they do that, go for that. Then, having married somebody that they liked, having moved to a house that they liked, having bought the car that they liked, again, of course, there's a limitation. Then they say, oh, this wife is not working. This house is not working. This car is not working. So I change it. And it's sure that I'll get happiness from the next wife, the next house, next car. And they go for the next one. Again, the same. So they keep on changing the furniture, changing wife, changing husband, changing house, until they die. I'm not making a joke. That's why like places like America, it's 50% divorce is taking place. I'm not exaggerating. So therefore the Buddhist teaching is saying, no. Happiness has to come from within, not from outside. So it's important not only to read the text, but relate it to real life and see how far these teachings are true. So, whether you do this meditation on the preciousness of human life, or impermanence, or karma, or force of samsara, it should be done in two parts: meditative session and post-meditative session. And when you do the meditative session also, then the beginning of the meditative session, the actual practice, and the conclusion. So the beginning is that you do the six preparatory practices. Whichever of this meditation you are going to do, you start by doing the 6 preparatory practices. And then, during the actual practice, then you should spend time reflecting in detail about each of these topics, which we have no time to explain here, so I'm going to go down a little bit. And then finally the conclusion. Whichever practice you are doing, then conclusion. During conclusion, then you make the needed wishes and prayers, like the Aryabhadra prayer and so forth. So it is in this way that you should be able to do 6 session practices, 3 times a day, 3 times a night, or at least few times in a day. As I said yesterday, for the food to the body, you need to eat many times. So similarly, spiritual practice also you need to do many times. If you don't feel like doing the 6 session practice many times, then you should remind yourself by saying, okay, then I will, if my mind is not willing to do the 6 session practice, then I will also reduce my food consumption. Have only breakfast. Be honest with both the body and the mind. Okay? Then having done that, then during the post-meditative session. Post-meditative session is actually very important. Because when you're in the meditative state, you really look like a good practitioner, Nobody's disturbing you, you are meditating on impermanence, karma and so forth, and you feel inspired and you look good, But when you get up from this meditation and mix with these unruly people, then problem starts. And I have that personal experience. Before I was translated to His Holiness, when I was studying in the Institute of Buddhist Dialectics, of course I go to attend His Holiness teaching. I take my pen and pencil and listen carefully and do the take the notes. I get so inspired and think, I must do something, do rigorous practice. Very inspired. You know how long it lasts? Until to the door of the temple. This is my real experience. I'm sure you have that experience. As soon as after the teaching, as soon as I step out of the door of the temple with this huge flood of human beings, it really looks like saying, Geshe-la, welcome back to the same familiar world. That's the problem, you see. So it's important that you should all, especially the young people, you should make it a habit to keep some texts with you, especially for the Tibetans, not just the English translation, but Tibetan texts, because Tibetans need to read the Tibetan texts. Now foreigners are coming here to read texts in Tibetan, and if you don't do that, then it's a shame. And then this text will remind you, spend few times. I once suggested that in the universities, among the Tibetans who go to different universities also, they have like socializing and the gathering and things like that. So I said, don't do this, spend the time always in the same way, eating something and playing something and nothing useful. Sometimes you come together, read a holy text. It may be so inspiring and so interesting. You don't have to sit there the whole day, but at least 1 hour, read one of the texts by the Buddha, 10, 20 pages by each and every student. It will be so nice. So like that, like the monks wear this kind of cloth, is a reminder. Otherwise this you can buy from the market, shaving the head. Especially winter, it's tormenting, We do this as a reminder that, you be careful. You be careful, If the armies wear the uniform, be careful, Your job is to fight. The monks wear this, your job is to study, meditate, be nice. This is a reminder. So similarly for the lay people also, keeping Buddha's image, some scriptures, these are reminders. So once you make it a habit. Unfortunately, sometimes people, we sell the books from the library. Now I'm doing my business advertisement. Okay. we sell the books from the library. And we try to make it nice with the cover, with a little bit color and things like that. And then it becomes a little bit more costly. And we can't, publish like 10,000 copies or 30,000 copies like that because there's not much market. So we are, compelled to publish 500 or 1,000 things like that. So it becomes a little bit more costly. So when people come, they say, it's so costly. The same people who are saying, when it comes to buying such a precious text, even by the Buddha, they say so costly. Then they go to the taxi stand, kitna hai? 100 rupees. Low. 100, 200 is no problem for them, going up, going down, Isn't this true? So that's our mentality, that clearly shows you don't have much appreciation of these greater values. And then how many times we go to restaurant? Just one lunch, one dinner is like 300, 400, 500 rupees, which is only one time, lasting for maybe 5 hours. So we need to change our mentality a little bit. And you should be like clever enough to have certain facilities, create an environment that would naturally compel you to do some of these things. Okay? So therefore, during the post-meditative session, put some restraint on your senses. If you don't put a little bit of restraint on your senses, then you go everywhere, you see everything. You see everything, you develop all kind of desires, attachment, things like that. Spending your money, whatever. Then you keep on hearing so many things, you hear many useless things, the gossips, the rumors, which will disturb your mind. Okay. Then smell also, then touching also. Put some restraint, a little bit more restraint on the senses. Okay? And then whatever you're doing, do it consciously. Second practice, consciously. That means you should not be doing things as if you are sleepwalking. Most of us do that, we do the same thing routinely without much thinking, like a robot, So that's when you do something, be fully present. What am I doing now? Is it good for me? Is it good for others? Is it good for the long run? Why am I have to do this? You ask question and with presence of mind. Do things knowingly, not unknowingly. It's very, very important, awareness. And then have moderation in your food. Food is important, but if you overeat, it will shorten your life. Even in that very day, you will have difficulty in breathing. Like some people, they eat so much. They feel later on, oh, Tashimashi say, Amen. Re Maria. I had a very interesting experience once when I was working in His Holiness office. So during the lunch break and after the office hours, I just used to come at the crossroad in front of the Institute of Buddhist Dialectics. So there's this little skinny Indian boy who is selling this Golgappa, you know. So I used to go to him and speak in Hindi and tease him. क्या हो गया इतना दुबला पतला कुछ खाना मिलता नहीं है huh? So I said, why, how come you're so skinny, are you not getting any food and things like that. You know what he said? बीमारी खाने से होता है, ज़्यादा खाने से होता है, कम खाने से नहीं होता है. This little boy, he said, most of the sicknesses are by eating too much, not by eating less. Pepe temperature, minute thamje senes, tane thamje yugnes, sej dua temperature dua, mi nasa mangja setan, nagi yorba. Shedu sej suri, but have moderation in food. And then make more effort in your practices and not sleeping too much, because you have the whole night for sleeping. So in the day, if you need 15-20 minutes rest to the brain, okay, it's okay. But not like the whole night you are sleeping and day also you are sleeping. There is a story of one teacher and a student. And then the student said, I'm doing a lot of Dharma practice. The teacher scolded him by saying, don't tell lie. I saw you sleeping the whole night. And in the day I saw you getting distracted everywhere. So when do you find time to do Dharma practice? Which is true. So when it comes to doing some practice or doing something good, it has to be done as soon as possible, without distraction. As I think it was the great teacher Kongtang Tenpa Dome who said, not being able to do Dharma practice, 20 years have been gone, because you are young. Then you waste another 20 years by saying, I will do Dharma practice, I will do Dharma practice, not being able to do it. So now you are over 40. Then you will say, I am unable to do Dharma practice, I am unable to do Dharma practice. So that is the biography of an empty life. Biography of an empty life. So it's really true. It's really true. You need to make a commitment, like at least, just as you, in terms of money, you have this thing called budget. Even for the family expenditures, people who are very spendthrift or very economical, they make a budget. I will spend this much money in this day or this month. They make a budget. So like that, for your spiritual practice also, you need to come up with a proper curriculum, kind of timetable, okay? At least one day I will spend 10 minutes, 20 minutes. So in the initial stages, it's very important. And once you see the benefit of such practice, then even if people tell you not to do it, nobody can stop you. You will go into it. Like some people come to me, and some people ask me, Geshe-la, you live alone? I said, yes. Don't you feel lonely? That's what people think. It's very interesting. Don't you feel lonely? Then I said, I'm sorry, I have no time for feeling lonely. Not that I'm doing great practice, but I'm doing something, reading a text. It becomes a habit. I'm not saying I'm a great practitioner. All I'm saying is I'm fond of reading Buddhist texts or other texts, teachings. So, I have no time, honestly speaking. So much short of time. So what I'm saying is you need to form a habit right in the beginning. then it will come to you naturally. But if you just keep on postponing next year, then it will, even next life, it will not happen. Oh yeah, that didn't much as much here. And especially in the text says, this human life is very precious, because whether you want to do sutric practice or you do tantric practice, whether you want to achieve liberation or to achieve enlightenment, there is no life in the whole universe which is better than human life. Okay? And Shantideva in his Bodhicharyavatara says, having found this precious human life, if you do not make your mind habituated with the virtuous practices, then there can be nothing more deceiving than this. There cannot be anything much more ignorant than this one. That's greatest deception if you don't do that. As I said yesterday, don't cheat yourself. Stop the cheating. And regarding how it's difficult to find this human life, it says that it's difficult to find because majority of the people, they normally join the bad forces. They do the bad thing, not the good thing. Majority. Like comparatively, probably those of us who are here much better than who live in big cities and things like that. You can go down and see how people living their life. Whole day, the whole month, the whole year, they're doing the same thing, just for money, nothing else. So comparing to that, we are a little bit better, you see. So the majority people are like that. And with negative ways of life, if you don't actualize human life, don't achieve human life, and then you will end up doing all the negative things, and there will be no choices at all. If you're born like a, say, lion, all it will do is killing animals. Okay? Now some people, some clever people, they might think, oh, this life I should have fun, and I will do Dharma practice next life. And there's a prayer that we do, may I actualize, may I obtain the precious human life next life. That is what we do. His Holiness, you don't have to pray, you have already obtained the human life now. And it's stupid to say that you waste this life and they say, how nice if I get a human life next time. Next time it's not sure. Right now you have already obtained human life, so make the best use of it. And then the text says, there are so many interesting things, but we have no time. At the time of the death, the only thing that will be of benefit and help to you is spiritual practice, nothing else. There's another important point that we need to know. Because at the time of death, none of your friends can come with you. They will all become excess baggage. You cannot take them with you. Your material belongings, your name, your fame, nothing can come with you. Even this body that you have now, you cannot take it with you. The body that you looked after so much, you cannot take it with you. Sometimes I jokingly tell people that the real tight security check will be there at that time. If you plan to take your body, just no, leave your body behind. You might be hiding something there. So it's very clear to all of us, we cannot take our body with us. So just like a string of hair pulled from a lump of butter, it's only the mind, the consciousness, which will go to the next life. And how good that mind will fare in their journey is dependent upon what kind of habit you have formed, positive or negative. I don't have to really explain much about this. And then about the karma also I'm not going to explain much. A little bit about the faults of the samsara. Out of the many faults of the samsara, one fault of the samsara is that there's no certainty in the samsara. Like enemy becomes friend, friend becomes enemy. There's no certainty, really. One point of the time you are so happy, next point of the time you are so sad. There's no certainty. So therefore it's important to find happiness in that uncertain life. That is possible only if you cultivate a proper, strong, stable mental outlook which sees all the possibilities. If your mind is prepared in this way, then whatever be the fluctuations, whatever fluctuations be there, whatever ups and downs will be there, still you will not be carried away by that fluctuations. Otherwise we'll die of shock. And many of us do that. You always think, I'm not going to die. My friend, my beloved friend is not going to die. And then suddenly that beloved friend dies, and then you are caught by surprise. You are a dim shock. Unbelievable, he died. But right from the beginning, if you have that knowledge, then not only you will be able to live happily, but you will also be able to make other people's life happier, and you will be able to inspire others to do more good things. Right from the beginning, you can do that. But normally, we don't think about this. And then when we are living together, we are not so nice to each other. Okay, for example, before marriage, okay, when somebody is about to marry, there's so much excitement, Then honeymoon, over the board, and so much excitement. But then after marriage, again you can see the uncertainty. The excitement goes down. Then you get married, have children, there's not much interest to each other, less interest. Uncertainty. You cannot get that long-lasting peace and happiness from there. So if you have understood right from the beginning, the impermanence of life, the suffering of life, uncertainty of life, then even your relationship will be much better, because you will have then more genuine compassion and love to that person, realizing that how long we are going to live together, nobody knows. But since right now we have this opportunity, be nice to each other. Help each other in the sense of encouraging each other, doing good things so that your beloved friend or yourself doesn't have to suffer negative consequences in the future lives. But what we do, when we are living together, we are not so nice to each other. When somebody dies, then you shed your crocodile tear. So in a way, the Buddha's teaching is saying, do those things which is useful. Don't do those things which is stupid and useless. When somebody dies and you cry, what is the benefit? To you and to that person, nothing, no use. When you live together, you didn't live nicely. Now when that person is gone, then you shed your crocodile tear. Useless things. So if you understand the way things are, the reality, then your relationship, your concern for others, your sense of responsibility will really, really improve. And then this next fault is fault of having no contentment. Having no contentment. That means forget about many lives. In this very one life, for example, how many buckets or bottles of water you drank until now? No satisfaction, still you have to drink. How many cups of tea you have drunk already, if you put them all together? Many, many buckets. Still there's no contentment. So that's the fault of the samsara. And the so-called happiness that we get in the ordinary world, it will never give you contentment because it is mixed with suffering. It is contaminated happiness. So therefore we are talking about achieving liberation so that you are able to achieve stable, reliable happiness, a happiness from where there is no falling back. So what we are experiencing right now will not give you long-lasting satisfaction. And particularly with the enjoyment of the sensual objects, there's no contentment. And because there is no contentment, we unnecessarily suffer. And in this context, sometimes I tell people that, okay, how many shoes you have? To be more on the practical side. Many people have like 40 pairs of shoes. Or 20 pairs of shoes. How many legs you have? Only 2. Why you have so many shoes? Because the advertisement says that you need one for rock climbing, another for jogging, another to go to bathroom. And then in this way you collect so many pairs of shoes. And some of these pairs of shoes you will never use in your life. It has been lying in your cupboard or box for the last 10, 20 years. Now I'm telling you my experience. You have to share your experience, Be honest, Because my sister always sends me shoes, So that's the thing, I'm not now just talking about shoes, then how many shirts you have, how many pants you have. You are not in need, but still keep on buying. Even though you know there's not enough space for you to keep all those things. On an important occasion you want to wear the best clothes, you are not able to find it, Oh, I kept it somewhere, somewhere down, Oh, what a headache. So therefore you can clearly see this really make your life like much more complicated. And wastage of money. And most of us don't have enough money, but still we have wasted so much money for useless things. And then the process of advertisement, they are so clever, so good in laying traps for us to catch, and we are so gullible that we are easily caught by their traps. Like the so-called big malls, I read Abhidharma, some of the good examples in the Abhidharma. Then I visited the mall. Oh, all the Abhidharma teachings there in the mall. Because in the Abhidharma teachings it says, if you get too obsessed with the 5 sensual objects, you will have big problem. And he gives the example by saying that the elephant is very obsessed with touch. So the hunter gently massages the body of the elephant, and the elephant feels so good. He closes his eyes and lies down, and then that person chains that elephant and enslaves that elephant. So you can see the destructiveness. The fish, how the fishermen catch the fish. They put a small piece of meat on the bed, as a bed, and put there, the fish come, and then he's caught and thrown because of attachment to the taste. Then the house flies, they are so obsessed with the smell, they sit on all kind of dirts, and then many a times their feet get stuck in that dirt and die. Butterfly, they are so attracted with the butter lamp, the flame, they go there as if it is a palace, and then they are burnt there, they die there. What? So now this is explained in the text. And then the sound. It is said some of the wild animals like deer, they are very attracted by the sound. So the hunters, they play a beautiful music and things like that. Then the hares come with their ears raised. And then there is a trap lying there. They are caught there. They also caught. And they are killed. So that's what is explained in Abhidharma and Buddhist texts. Now you go to the mall. The first floor is all kind of scents prepared from this flower, that flower, nicely packed bottles, different smell, It's then you get it entrapped there. You have to spend a chunk of money for this scent, perfume. I'm not exaggerating. I've seen this. Go to the next floor. Let us say restaurant. Taste Japanese food, Chinese food, American food. It's all there. And then many of these restaurants, they are so clever. They will even dim the light. They give you a big plate with a little bit of lentil soup, charging exorbitantly or something like that. Charging highly. And I say, yes, 5-star hotel, yes. And then you go to the next floor. All kinds of music, CD, DVDs, Japanese music, Chinese music, whatever. Then go to the next floor, clothes for touch. Go to the next floor, televisions, forms to see. Because these business people, they know our weaknesses. We are very strongly obsessed, attracted with the sensual objects. And then they lay the trap. And then especially if you visit these big malls, they're so good in entrapping you. They'll say, buy one free. Have you thought about those things? Once I was reading a magazine on my flight from, I think, Germany or somewhere. I was reading a magazine which talks about a very interesting thing that we experience when we do the shopping. It's called shopping coma. That means when you visit a big mall and market, then you see all these nicely arranged things, and then you lose your sense of judgment, and then you move like a zombie here, everywhere. And there is somebody already moving in front of you with a basket, putting something, Oh, you should also do like that. Okay, you pick the basket and something. And you don't have sense how much money you are paying because you are paying through the plastic card. And you are not sure how much money is there in your plastic card. You see? You go there, then buy one free. Okay. Maybe next time I need it. Maybe for my friend I need it. So therefore what I'm really saying is that unless you put some restraint to the dictates of the senses, it will make you materially poor and spiritually poor. That's what I'm saying. So it's important to analyze what are you doing, where are you going, what are you thinking, and so forth. And then another fault of the samsara is that once you are in the samsara, you have to die again and again. There's no choice. Even if you go to the best hospital, to the best doctor, nobody can postpone your death. Even if you are great, the world's number one runner in the world, and if the death is coming, you want to escape and run, not possible. Even if you're a great diver, and dive into the depth of the ocean and hide there, no, not possible. There's a story at the time of the Buddha when there was a fighting going on and much killings were happening. And then one person, he came and hid himself under the robe of Buddha, or the begging bowl of Buddha, or something like that. And when the fighting was over, so many people dead, and then this person was also dead there. When the time comes, you die like that. And I've seen, when I was in school as a student, I've seen one morning we were doing exercise. There was one very robust, girl, and she just fell and died. When she was running, she was very healthy. So that's the thing, you see. So that's the nature of the samsara. And then the fault of ups and downs. So much ups and downs. Today happy, tomorrow unhappy, today rich, tomorrow poor, So if you are not mentally prepared, you are going to suffer terribly. But if you have this understanding that these are the part of the deal of the samsara, then if you hear very good news today, then you say, okay, it's good, but tomorrow there may be bad news. You feel happy, but not get too excited to the extent that you will burst out. Otherwise, normally when we get news, we are over the board, as we say, over the moon. You're so excited, you become proud. I did it. And next time there is a bad news, you completely deflated. Gangbu Pushorn. Completely deflated. So the Buddhist teaching says, no, it's part of the deal. If it's good news today, don't get too excited. Okay, you have every right to be happy, but don't get too excited. Bad news is bad. If you get bad news, it's bad, but don't get too shocked. Good news is bad. Meaning that you need to develop that holistic perspective. Develop a holistic perspective. Don't make yourself get bogged down on one small thing. Like some people, when they experience some difficulty, some problem, they have this tendency of spending their whole energy just focusing on that misery. I am the most unfortunate person in the world. How come nobody is suffering except me? Even when they get a headache, they think like that. You see? So if you focus on this small problem, then now it is medically and scientifically found that people who focus just on their small problem, then it's difficult to even medically heal those people. So it's important to develop a holistic view. Yes, I have some problem, but comparing to many other people, this is nothing. I have medical facilities here, I have friends here, I have certain practices that I can do, so I'm lucky. And also this negative experience that I'm having, the headache that I'm having, may be a symbol of purification of my negative deeds in the past. So with this kind of positive attitude, you can reduce the intensity of those problems and sufferings. It's very important. Like for example, I give you a very nice example. Like for example, how your mental perspective changes the situation. I'll give you an example. Like for example, we are now in this nice room with the light and so on. So we are happy, we are able to see things. Now you start thinking about something negative, the suffering that you experienced last year or yesterday, something like that. Oh, I had this tragedy, so bad. Please switch off the light. Please close the window. You're bringing more darkness because of your mental darkness. You don't want to look outside the window. You don't want to let the fresh air come inside. You will be naturally more miserable. Because you are thinking, meditating only on darkness. So instead of that, even though you had that personal tragedy, but okay, this is unfortunate, but let us see what the people are doing. Then you'll find cute small children playing and very happy. Flowers are there, different kind of flowers are there. The nice people are there, having nice lunch, dinner, whatever, Oh, what I am experiencing is not the whole truth. There are so many other good things, you see. So it's important to see the larger picture, because you may have this problem, you may have this failure, but that is not your whole story. You have so many other areas where you are good, where you are successful. And I think this time or some other time I give you this example. For example, if there's a person who had lost his left hand. Now if you keep on thinking about this missing hand for the rest of your life, I am so unfortunate, I don't have the left hand, I don't have the left hand. And with this process, if you forget the right hand and don't use it, it's real tragedy. So instead of thinking this missing hand, okay, I don't have this left hand, but I have the right hand. There are many people who don't have both the hands, both the eyes. So comparatively, I'm lucky. And in fact, the right hand is the stronger one. If you think like that, I have visited this big lepers colony in Madras, which is the headquarters of the leprosy, treatment, lepers treatment. There are over 70 centers for people suffering from leprosy. So there I saw these people to have all like lost their fingers. But it's very cheerful still. Some of them are without this finger, they're trying to make some chair, or even some of them playing like, carom and things like that, you see. And I saw one from Tibet whose hand was missing up to this point. And with this stump, he was using this stump for painting. Meaning that if you don't lose your hope, you can do so many things. Now in the West, you see the disabled people, they are playing fantastic sports, So therefore it's important to always maintain that larger perspective. I'm sorry, I overstate. So I'll stop here. Thank you.